Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode. Hopefully, my voice is clear and the stream won't have any disturbances. Let's continue. All right, let's begin. The title that has come to me is My Species Awaken. And I want to speak about a sort of conceptual familiarity I attained when I got really pulled towards the Bhagavad Gita at some point. Now, before I explain what the Bhagavad Gita is, in the subtitle I've written Field of the Activity of the Knower. This statement is one of the most important statements in this plane of existence, because we as human beings come across to ourselves as knowers in an unknown world. And the evolution of humanity is how we engage the unknown. You see, it's not just important how you approach what you know, it's also important how you approach what you don't know. You know, Marcus Aurelius, this great conqueror, he said, "The soul is dyed with the color of its thoughts." And in the Yoga Patanjali Sutras, they said consciousness is like an orb, glass orb, moving around many colored surfaces. And so if our consciousness is attributeless to all the attributes that are in the field of the activity of the knower, in the fields of activity of the knower, I feel our species is evolving beyond language, and this greater awakening, this kind of call to an inner action, we awaken beyond language, beyond the dream that is language, beyond the dream that is conception. The Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, or Bhagavad Gita, I can say, it's something that was said to have been written by the sage. This is an ancient book by the sage Rishi Vyasa. And back in the day when what was paper was like giant leaves or something. You know, like the person who wrote this book wrote it evidently on leaves, and it endured through the test of time, as if the world wanted his Rishi Vyasa's voice to echo. He's a very, very close character in my mind. You know, Rishi Vyasa, he follows the logos, his intuition, and he writes 18 books which end up becoming the Puranas. These Puranas, after writing these very kind of, for the time, incredibly sophisticated kind of stories that in them had resolutions to civilization's future and society and various ways of living, after writing the 18 books, Rishi Vyasa stares into the sky, no longer feeling a sort of still not feeling content, still not feeling satisfied, as if his work in this plane of existence is complete. And as the story goes, an angel through a person comes to him out of nowhere and says, "Rishi Vyasa, unless you write about your love of truth, you will not be content. Your universal heart will still be yearning." And so Rishi Vyasa attempts writing a book about the greatest devotion of an inner vision to the world, to the truth of the world. Whereas back in the day they saw it, God. So Rishi Vyasa writes this book, and it's the Srimad Bhagavad Gita Bhagavatam, and in it there is the story of an archer like a guy with a bow and arrow, and he's in this great war, and he suddenly sees that his opponents is people he doesn't want to fight with. And it is then that God appears to him, Krishna appears to him in the battlefield. Krishna appears in the battlefield to an archer and says, you must fight. And at that point, the archer goes to an existential inquiry and pretty much interviews God towards the ultimate truth. And when God reveals his true form, which is, as I don't remember the exact wording, but it was so intense that Arjuna is the archer and Krishna is the God, Arjuna in that moment, he could not, in some sense, handle it, but he gets realized, and then he abides by the will. He abides by his macrocosmic intuition, his universal being. And once Rishi Vyasa writes this book, it's as if he's completed his work in this plane of existence. And guys, it's very incredible because the same way a person sees that they wake up and go to work, to go wake up and as a knower become active in a sort of field of effort and contribution. And by the way, guys, please excuse the clicking noises. This is my mouse, and I'm gonna hopefully get a new setup in a new location soon. So just endure with me. So I have the Bhagavad Gita here with me to kind of read a part of it. I'm gonna open a random page here and read it for you. And okay, so in the Srimad Bhagavad Gita, it's page 83, text 18 to 20. It says, in this world, that great soul has nothing to gain by action, nor by abstaining from action, nor has he selfish dependence of any kind on any creature. So guys, let me tell you what's going on. So this is, if I go a bit earlier, Krishna is telling Arjuna. And I'll just read from the page before, actually, the page on the left side of the book. So Krishna is responding to Arjuna. He says, Arjuna, he who does not follow the wheel of creation, thus set in motion in this world, does not perform his duties, leads a sinful and sensual life, he lives in vain. He, however, who takes delight in the self alone, and is gratified with the self, and is contented in the self, has no duty to perform. In this world, that great soul has nothing to gain by action, nor by abstaining from action, nor has he selfish dependence of any kind on any creature. Therefore, go on efficiently doing your duty at all times without attachment. Doing work without attachment, man attains the supreme. So guys, check that out. Doing work without attachment, man attains the supreme. And just a side commentary, like a quick Mr. Within commentary on this. What it is really meant, doing work without attachment, man attains the supreme. Lao Tzu, for example, in the Tao Te Ching, he spoke about it as if the action through inaction. Moriya Ueshiba, the founder of Aikido, spoke about the soul being the witness, the witness. It spoke about the truth to be the witness of the soul of heaven and earth. The movement of the soul of heaven and earth. That's how Moriya Ueshiba, the founder of Aikido, kind of perceived it. So what it is this parallel is being found. Pretty much various human beings are finding themselves in what I would call playfully divine will rhythms. unknown will rhythms, and so this is in some sense you can say some people are looking at things as particles and functioning. Some people are looking at the moment as a field, as a having a momentum. For example, in Christianity, the denomination of those who are Calvinist, for example, Calvinists, they believe in a predestiny where it's as if every sin you're gonna make is predestined to. Or every good deed you do is predestined. So it's like, you see, it's where man's mind is open to various things, but some people can identify with the vehicle they're in, and some people can identify as being a being beyond the vehicle. I feel that we are more multidimensional than our language has ever been able to contain or will ever be able to contain, and therefore experientially we're not just limited to what sensory phenomena is. We're also noticing that sensory phenomena is being processed, and in the awareness to how a creature is processing or articulating the objective realm subjectively and their intersection and rhythm, and you, believe it or not, find yourself suddenly in a field of motion inseparable from the individual activity and the cosmic activity. That means right now we think we are in a cosmos. Okay, and there are even people are like, can we ever go beyond this universe? Like there are explorers of that depth. But the idea is that I think doing work without attachment, man attains the supreme, as the Gita says. It's like when you know how they say when you're having fun, time flies. It's like when you're abiding by the field, individual linguistic purpose and truth is secondary. The primary mover of the moment is your direct experience. So it's as if you are trying to, most people I think are conditioned in the society of ours in civilization 1.0. Hopefully I've spoken about civilization 2.0 and we can get there, but or at least we can plant the seeds or set certain visions into motion on the surface of this pebble in a light beam. But it's an awareness. It's an awareness to a prime, direct experiential mover before the conceptual, any sort of conceptual structure. It's the strength within. Like, for example, look at this wallpaper I've chosen. You see that one guy, like this giant dragon, this giant chaos outside of the free will has appeared. But the power of the free will is that it has different dimensional access. Do you know? And what that means is, imagine you are in some sense kind of like the child of an emperor back in the day, and someone is, for example, you're walking in the street dressed casually, not as an emperor, and somebody is rude to you, and somebody is rude to you, and so you are endlessly forgiving because you know the might he can unleash, right? As the child of an emperor, like just playfully imagining. So, so the thing is, it's like great power doesn't demonstrate. Great power remains dormant until necessary, because the gratification of the moment is from a state of awareness where, again, as the cosmic activity and the individual activity are inseparable. That means right now we think we are in the world. That's how the free will is here. But if the free will was chaotically challenged, the greater order it would bring would be the will of the cosmos. Do you know what that means? Is when man found himself alone in a rock in the middle of space, the moment he could see himself as a person, then man looked at the skies and wondered, could there be a personality to this pitch black endlessness? And so that's really the 6th century effort of religions. For me, religion is it's incredible artwork. It's like it's like if you were an architect, like it's like a very, very strange, like, you know how we get so fascinated by the pyramids of Giza, which are the 7th wonder of the world, right? The pyramids of Giza, their architecture, their design, the potential they had back in the day even to perform such a feat, the amount of lives taken to perform such a feat, It's as if the pyramid was more important than people's lives, you know. So it's that's the thing, you know. It's like you see a wonder to the architecture of the phenomena that is unfamiliar to the limits of the conscious mind. And so the same way it's like the Pyramid of Giza is so wondrous, it's so magnificent. I find similarly, ancient books are like, again, like it's like you're a tourist seeing the Pyramid of Giza. Right? For me, language, the easiest way to get rid of the emotional warfare or the emotional uh, disconfrontations, let's say, that happens between ideological systems is because the ideological systems are afraid that if they become multidimensional, they may lose a sight of their dimension. It's like a person who doesn't want to change because they don't know what they will change into. You know, once we have an ability to, you know, not just seek equality for people, but seek equality for inner archetypal spectrums. It's like once you accept your shadow, then you can accept your light. It's easier, you know, or you can accept your light first, then accept your shadow. And what that means is man's mind has different potentials. You are a multi-dash navigator. You know, you can navigate in multiple ways as a being, you know. And when I say this, this is not multitasking. Multitasking has a pre-planning to it. You know, it's like I'll share something with the viewers, something about a science fiction. It's a chapter in this giant science fiction book I'm writing that hopefully one day will be published, and I think it would contribute to the modern mythology. There's a chapter where I created a character, the chapter that was called Mephisto's Denial. Alright, guys, hold on. I gotta find a nice song to tell you this chapter. Like I got headphones on right now. Pretty much, guys, my science fiction novel is called The Messenger of Giants. And there's a chapter in it, and it's set in the year 5025, but there are different parallel dimensions to the Earth. And there's even communication between these parallel dimensions. Now, in this universe of The Messenger of Giants, this novel I've written, it's how can I tell you? Mephisto's Denial. The chapter begins. Who is Mephisto? Mephisto is is a human being. Is a human being who is the greatest architect ever. He has become famous by creating an like a architectural kind of like creating a building between two parallel dimensions. He was the first one, you know, to do that. You know, to create a building where in one parallel dimension of Earth, the building goes up to the clouds, but the moment when you go above the clouds, you see nothing. There's no building. And when you go into, what do you call it? When you go into the other parallel dimension from above the clouds, the rest of the skyscraper is there. Right, so he's the architect who did that, and he knows the secret, but he's kind of shared it with the enlightened society, which is this the government of all the different parallel dimensions of Earth. It's for the first time I created the concept of a government that is governing different parallel dimensions of the Earth, not just one. That's the Enlightened Society in the book. And there's so many wonderful chapters dedicated to what the Enlightened Society does or how it comes about. But anyways, so Mephisto is this next level architect, and he is one of the wealthiest people also. And he's so wealthy, and he's so done everything that he's under the impression that he's working with, what do you call it, the Enlightened Society, and he's signed up for this kind of interstellar project where how can I tell you, the whole point of Mephisto's denial is this man was so rich and yet so lived a human life that he was looking for something else. Because he was an architect, they had decided, so this is, oh god, this is a strange concept to explain, but just a second, guys, I had to catch my breath. Sorry, guys, I'll be back in a couple minutes. Something's happened, I gotta handle it. I'll be back. Okay. So, sorry about that, guys. Like, there was something I couldn't avoid. I just had to handle it. So I gotta say the whole Mephisto's denial chapter maybe again. Okay. Memphis, so this architect who made a building between two parallel dimensions that he became incredibly famous, decided to enlist for this next level project of being the first human being to go and be born into a very unique species. And I forget the name I gave it, it's in my writings, but it's like he's pretty much gonna go, his consciousness is like, his body's gonna be like kind of like the Matrix, in a ship in the orbit, in a stealth ship in the orbit of the planet, and his consciousness is gonna, in some sense, incarnate as a child of an aristocrat of this alien species. That this alien species, pretty much Mephisto's applied to be the first alien to make contact from their species, being born into their alien species with humans, right? So that there's these kind of contracts with the solar, what do you call it, with the soul of like the. And Mephisto signed a contract for the whole program. And Mephisto's denial is the point where, and something I forgot to mention, the reason Mephisto signed up for this program to kind of be born into this extraterrestrial species that hasn't made contact with humans yet is because they had a technology to levitate things and also to, in some sense, touch buildings and make the buildings alive. So, as an architect, Mephisto was fascinated by this. He signed the contract to be born as a child in that species, with a certain karmic kind of positioning. And again, to in the contract, he's going to be the first being to make contact with Earth. Okay, so what happens is that as Mephisto is kind of, this whole thing is going on, where he's in the ship and they've connected him up and he's being kind of born. He's born, suddenly next moment his eyes open as a baby in the arms of like his alien mother. And I don't remember exactly how the aliens looked. I think they had maybe purple hair and they were red skinned. I don't remember, but it was like, anyways, they were a peaceful kind of evolving but very uniquely skilled kind of species, alien species. This is all in the science fiction novel, by the way. So what happens is Mephisto, now this is how far I'm going to tell you, something messed up happens in the place where Mephisto is, something gets infiltrated. And so Mephisto suddenly gets all his memories back while he's in the simulation and while he's also born as this new alien child, right? So as an alien child, he's starting in his alien life, he's incarnation, he's kind of perceiving like he's suddenly getting memories of the ship and everything, you know? And Mephisto's denial is where he denies a part of the contract that he's made, his solar contract he's made, you know. So that's the chapter about Mephisto's denial, you know. For me, the inner realms of the human being is one of the most fascinating views of access. That when we look at other species, our species took a step that was different than the rest. Our species took an inner step. You see, many animals on this on the surface of our planet, they haven't. They haven't taken an inner step. But we had an inner evolution, a sort of subjective evolution, which is, I've kind of designed the concept to mean, in some sense, the evolution of an object into a subject to itself. And when you become a subject to itself, you're always out of the body of that thought. So, it's like it's kind of interesting. Your objective self, you're in the body. Your subjective self, you're always outside of the subjective body. Do you know what I mean? So what that means is, this is why I say a wise man realizes that, in some sense, there's this saying, they say a wise man once did nothing. And the reason is because it's like the sensitivity, the attention to the moment. The attention to the moment can surpass humanhood. And it has. That means the concept of humanity is relevant in certain states. Imagine you're on the street talking to someone, you're talking to a friend, suddenly you see that friend glitch. You see like the whole moment, like a video game, suddenly start glitching, like digitally glitching, like the moment. So then it would be a sort of shock of suddenly recognizing the world as a simulation. And I have kind of wondered, it was as if the moment I realized the world could break, I kind of asked Thor for his hammer. And what I mean by that is the world is the world of language that we have built that contains the actual world, you know? When a person looks at an object, it really has no meaning. It has no nature. It's our attention that gives it meaning, that gives it a nature. The world is a movement. This movement is set in motion prior to its own self-definition. That's the attention we need towards the field of activity of the knower. We need to ask the simple questions again to see how complexity can be realigned, repositioned. You see, sometimes when, like I've said this often, that when I speak, for me, language, when I was younger, it was more like something you just had to use a certain way. But when I got older, it became like a palette of colors. It became like paint for me. When I speak, I'm kind of in my inner realms painting, believe it or not. But anyways, I'm gonna open another random page from this mini Bhagavad Gita book that I bought in the UK years ago. So it's page 188, chapter 9. Arjuna is saying to Krishna, even if the vilest sinner worships me with exclusive devotion, he should be regarded a saint, for he has rightly resolved. He is positive in his belief that there is nothing like devoted worship of God. By the way, guys, this is an ancient book, keep that in mind. Speedily he becomes virtuous and attains abiding peace. Know it for certain, Arjuna, that my devotee never perishes. That's another way of saying when you're aware of the field of activity of the knower, the primal field, the primordial field of activity of the knower, that's when you technically can never die, because you are not something that can die. You are the light in the room, pretty much. The darkness that can fade, not the light. Arjuna says, Krishna continues. He says, Arjuna, women, Vaisyas, members of the trading and agricultural classes, Sudras, those belonging to the labor and artisan classes, as well as those of impious birth, such as the pariah, whoever they may be, taking refuge in me, they too attain the supreme goal. How much more then if they be holy, brahmanas and royal sages devoted to me? Therefore, having obtained this joyless and transient human life, constantly worship me. So check this out. God's kind of telling Arjuna, like if Arjuna had an ego, he'd be like, God, are you saying my life's joyless and transient? And God's like, yeah, I'm saying that. So you see, guys, here's the thing. It's like we were so oblivious as entities that there had to be stories written of truths beyond our mind. We can say the unfathomable presence of a personality, do you know? And so you can. It's kind of like, you see, it's like a field of intelligence personified in some mysterious human reflection, and this archetype is telling Arjuna that in some sense only truth is paying attention to the source of intelligence. That's it. I mean, what else can the word God even mean other than source of intelligence, source of activity? What else? Is it a concept? Is it even, can we put it in the dictionary, the word? One day I hope to see on this planet honest dictionaries, and honest dictionaries would be like, you go to look at the definition of the word, and the dictionary would be like, the definition of this word, this is a concept I've created, I call it the language threshold. The dictionary would be like, you come to the definition, let's say, of the word God in the dictionary, and you see there is an honest note that says definition inaccessible, or definition maybe beyond the language threshold, or or the dictionary says, I don't know. You go to the dictionary, you open it up, you're like, all right, let's see what this word means, and then the dictionary is like, I have no clue, man. I'm just I'm just ink on a page. You're asking the wrong object. Anyways, I'm going to continue with the passage. Fix your mind on me. Krishna is saying this to Arjuna. He says, be devoted to me, worship me, and make obeisance to me. Thus, linking yourself with me and entirely depending on me, you shall come to me. Okay, this needs explanation, because in today's culture, it's probably going to be interpreted as the ignorance of power, of mind power. But I'll tell you this. Check this out, guys. Trust is a very important element. You see, if philosophy finds the door or the hidden portal, trust is what actually journeys into the unknown. Any moment you don't trust, you can't access your intelligence, that your inner realms is disconnected to the outer realms. If you trust, and if you are comfortable with the unknown, that means your mind no longer goes into this sort of loop, ideological loop, of constantly trying to shape itself. It just watches as shapes appear, as they come and go. It's like right now, people don't control the weather. Those clouds I see outside of my window, I didn't tell those clouds to be here. Even if I looked at those clouds and I'm like, clouds, get out of here. Those clouds will not move because they are not projected by my free will. Do you see? And I remember I gave this talk. I would recommend anybody interested in this idea I said right now. It's called "Are We the Imagination of God?" So I was kind of trying to wonder if there was this unknown conscious field, let's say unconscious field. We as a conscious kind of particle in this unconscious field are like, whoa, we're not just a particle in space. We are a process of a mind that has access to you can say the galactic what's the name? How have I forgotten the name of this? Just a second, guys. I gotta Google this. I forget what the river in India was called. Oh, Ganga River. So in India, there's this river, I believe they call it Mother Ganga. So the river is like a guru. The ultimate teaching that life beyond snapshot judgments flows on. That's the greatest for me. Whenever there is chaos, the order doesn't come from the chaos being challenged. Chaos is chaos. When chaos is chaos, you know what that means? That means order is a different dimension. It's kind of like man, the human being, like the Homo sapien attained a certain level of consciousness where he's like, where did I come from? And the human being went looking for the answers only to discover that he created the question. This is why there's a sort of strange ability that comes. Really, I think you see there. I don't know. There is this school of thought that says you gotta confront your fears, and there's another school of thought where fears dismantle in conceptual value. Literally, the concept of fear doesn't exist for you anymore. You just see an unknown moment, and you can either trust the moment or not. That's it. Um, Text 15 to 17 of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, he who is not a source of annoyance to his fellow creatures, and who in his turn does not feel vexed with his fellow creatures, and who is free from delight and envy, perturbation and fear, is dear to me. What does that mean? That means as if there was an intelligent truth, this intelligent truth to the cosmic landscape appreciates when an individual consciousness lifts itself up. You see, so many people on the planet are waiting for a savior. Not realizing that nobody else has access to the world they see other than themselves. They are the creators of their free will. So isn't it unique that the same way an author looks at an empty page and writes a sentence, it's as if in void space, manifestation is written through a sort of physical, astronomical program. It's like the cosmic inflation. This concept for me is you see when I find that when like every moment can be added more complexity, or the complexity can be reduced, and profoundness really applies when there are bridges made between dimensions of utility. Krishna says, "He who expects nothing, who is both internally and externally pure, is wise and impartial and has risen above all distractions, and who renounces the sense of doership in all undertakings. Such a devotee of mine is dear to me." You know, the world is not just a simple occurrence. Every simple moment, just like how different particles are connected to kind of constitute the atom, different moments are connected to create a sort of particle of meaning. And some have called this idea a meme, just like we have a gene for the human being, we have a meme for the ideological being. And this is the fascinating thing, that knowledge, if considered to be a process, to be a living process rather than a sort of portrait to pass down in history, its evolution is going to be a sort of efficient vision in wilderness. So for me in my life, there was a sort of ethical system, especially being raised as a child, like till the age of 7 in Iran. And also kind of, how can I tell you, wherever you're born, you're kind of soaking up the environment like a sponge. Now you may not realize it, but the subconscious mind is doing that. That means something about it. It was some saying in Japanese culture where they would say the man is the room he is in, right? And now, if you want to take it very more, a bit more kind of deeper towards the language threshold, it would be a sort of the man is that not just his outer room, but his inner room. That means I have found myself like there was a time in the UK when I was giving these talks. I would like go into this beautiful garden or around this. I was a university student at the time, like in this nice garden place. I would give this talk, and then on my way back, I would see like this kind of disastrous people just attempting to throw their trash, and it missed the trash can, and trash just on the ground right in front of this walking place of the entrance to this accommodation area, right? And I remember I was like, and it was just like trash, and I was like, what is this? It felt like, the city was disgracing itself, You know, cities back in the day in certain cultures were designed to be beautiful and advanced and geometrically celestial, you know. But nowadays, it's like we don't care about infrastructure. We just care about the energy that it takes to keep something alive, which is a monetary. It's like you know how much the need, like money, is incredible, but at the same time, it is something where it's like how war kind of sacrificed, you know, like 50, what was it, like 53 million people died in World War II, something like that, like a giant number of people. And I was thinking, whoa, how many of those people were scientists? How many of those people were painters, artists? You know, how many of those people were philosophers? How many of those people could have been, you know, geniuses of mankind? So I saw like the same way that that war took away so many lives of so much potential, the same way the economical system is kind of taking away the opportunity to be intelligent. And I'll tell you something, whenever a person finds themselves in a cruel environment, when you see something cruel, that's another way of saying there is inefficient intelligence functioning there. Do you know? Let me tell you, cruelty is strange. It's kind of it's a similar insanity as that person like in downtown Toronto. I remember when I was going there, there was a person shouting at, I don't know, his reflection in the window, or like just shouting in the street. You know. So that shouting was as if that person did not have the discretion to notice there was a world that was not just what they saw. They thought what they saw was only it. And cruelty is a sort of, you can say, delusion of the same sort, where the person is trapped in his inner house. He's just justifying things. This is why conquerors, when they got confronted by, when they got scolded by mystics, they were scolded as if they were little children. Do you know? Do you know how many yogis and sages have gone to emperors and they're like, "What are you doing, you little kid?" You know? Because awareness is the privilege of the lifetime. For me, awareness is like space. Space cannot die. Our soul, it's as if there was a soul, this unknown X variable in this mathematical equation of manifestation, it's as if it's not just in the body, it is in the space. That is why your mind is your whole moment. Because this is one of those things in philosophy, or we can say in metaphysics, which is one of the most incredible discussions, that what is the relationship of the conceptual significance of the word mind and the conceptual significance of the word soul or awareness. And so we see our sense of self is in a sort of mental field. And what a mental field is the acceptance of certain axes of definition, or another way you can say axioms. Okay? Now, what an axiom is in some sense, it is a firm declaration of how the image of how the context design of a moment is set into motion, right? Sometimes when I give a talk, if I am, it's like, you know, of course I got to keep some part of the talk unknown, so I have an interest to journey through the talk, you know. If I assume I know everything about the talk from the beginning, it's as if like a person that is limiting his color, the colors he's using to paint something, because he thinks he has to only paint a certain thing. For me, I realized is that all my certainty, just like this planet, is hovering in the middle of nowhere. And when you look at the word nowhere, there's the clue. Put a space between the W and H, and you're now here. So nowhere equals now plus here. And I've always been fascinated, guys, why man it has been set in motion in a sort of evolutionary um, linguistic simulation based scheme that the god it's as if, like, you see, I thought in that moment when Michelangelo was drawing on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, the paint this picture where God's finger and man's finger are like close to touching. Like, that's a very deep, for a philosopher, that's one, like, if every philosopher should have that picture on the wall, you know. Let me see if I can find it so an audience new to the concept can see it. There we go. So guys, this is the exact artwork. There we go. Oh my god. There we go. In case anybody wants to see the big kind of version of it. This was drawn by Michelangelo. Let's see what date. Probably oh, 1512, yeah. I was guessing somewhere. I was guessing 1600s, but yeah. So in 1512, Michelangelo drew God and man and a space between their fingers. That means man and God are in the same world, same present moment, or the here and now, as the New Age community idolizes. But that space between the finger, I'm pretty sure when Michelangelo was drawing, he probably left the fingers as the last thing to draw. Like, that would be a cool thing to leave behind as the last part of the painting to draw. You know, and when he was about to draw it, right before he colored in the gap in the middle of the finger, he probably thought, you know, it's like the gap between, it's like man is between. It's like, you see it, it's like the consciousness, or let's say the solar attention, SOULAR, in other words, soul plus SOLAR, solar. So light inspired kind of evocation of archetype of a soul. We are the space between self and world, man and God. And when the species awakens beyond the language threshold, that's when I say, Mr. Within says, the multidimensional renaissance is going to occur. We as human beings transcend our own limits. We honor the vision that our ancestors continued, and what gave meaning to the lives of our ancestors was the opportunity for us to find the meaning. Sometimes the meaning of life is not direct, it's indirect. That means when a person looks at a business, When a person, let's say you were an entrepreneur, you're considering the short term and the long term of this business, and your business is like an entity finding itself in a concrete jungle. It has to become aware of the market to survive. It has to adjust its business model to what the market commands it, or it has to dress for the weather of the, fiscal year. The long term is the macrocosmic purpose. The short term is the microcosmic purpose. And all purpose is really how there is a pure position of being. For me, I had a sort of playful 14. I remember I went on a writing sort of frenzy. And in this writing frenzy, what happened was that I wrote so much, and you might not believe it, but I designed this, I kind of engineered this way of writing books really quickly. And I can tell you I had written probably close to uh, maybe like uh, 100,000. No, no. Uh, it's I wrote a lot, like every day for a couple years. Every day for a couple years, my hand held the pen, and it was speaking its own. It was playing its own tune. So you see, it's like intelligence is not linear. The moment you get exposed to linearity, your mind has an ability for actually the opposite. Though it's like first you gotta see reality, then you can imagine a world with no heaven. I think this concept of the language threshold that I'm sharing is the greatest discovery of this current century. I think it's the greatest realization. And it's what all the continental philosophers subconsciously acknowledged. You see, when I think about myself subjectively, it's no longer concept based. That means strangely I don't appear as a concept to myself much until I speak or I move. And when I'm in stillness and silence, there's literally just pure being and witness, and what else can there be? Just energy conscious of itself. Energy is just chilling in its own awareness as a self. We're all just energy being energy, guys. I think the Buddha had this saying, which pretty much dismantles all efforts for all teachers. The Buddha destroyed the concept of a teacher. Some people say the Buddha was the greatest teacher, but I'm telling you, he destroyed the concept of a teacher. The Buddha said, somebody asked him, it's like, Buddha, after you die, will there be other Buddhas? Now, there's one version, I don't know how authenticated the story is, but it's a story definitely out there, that when the person was asked from Buddha, like, Buddha, is there going to be another Buddha? And Buddha was like, no. And there was a yes and no kind of answer, I feel, because you can see it's a multidimensional question, really. Um, but Buddha said, in the version of the story that I'm telling you, Buddha said that no, because Buddhism would have been spread so far, So I want you to imagine that this was not a conceptual teaching, this was an experiential teaching. And the old world fulfilled its task. It planted the seed of the infinite vision. Or let me say it like this, it watered the seed of the infinite vision. So I feel really the concept of this whole educational system of teacher student, it doesn't make sense. It's much more better to see all of us as comrades on the same battlefield of knowledge in which the unknown is what we're trying to explore. You know, it's like kind of like educational system is our night's watch, and we have to send scouts outside of the wall, and that those scouts would be the highest level of academia. That means I have many visions for how the educational system of the future generations should be designed. Uh, but anyways, so this notion of the teaching would have spread so far that there would no longer be a need for the teacher student means full responsibility of the conscious mind of its unconscious. Hmm. If we over glorify ourselves ideologically and based on certain narratives, I feel when we miss out on the collective rhythm. I feel our minds are surfboards on unknown waves of intelligence. I feel that it's kind of like the relationship of a particle with a field, or let's say a known particle with an unknown field, is really that the unknown field has nothing else to do other than look at the known. And the known has nothing to do other than look at the unknown. That means any conception ever in any sort of metaphysical context, anywhere in history and any culture that has considered beings on like in other dimensions or beyond the veil of thought or the veil of sensory perception, all of those have been a suggestion that it's a reflection. In some sense, let me tell you how. That means for God, man is the unknown, is what to watch. And for man, it's like the unknown is the unknown. And this symbiosis with an unknown intelligence is really the crucial factor. You know, the scholar Terence McKenna, he said something where he said, there's another tenant in the room. And he didn't say it in a very physical way, as if like he said there is another sort of intelligence. Now that intelligence, many philosophers have attempted to comprehend it. Pretty much every philosopher ever has noticed that there isn't just a gravity upon objects. All subjects are gravitating towards an inconceivable collective vastness. And that vastness is intelligent, but it's intelligent beyond the language threshold. Beyond language is an inner technology that is dualistically designed. Once you learn to appreciate design, guys, you see the amount of access there is. That means, like a person, just think about it this way. What is something here? I'll say a riddle, a mystical riddle. What is something that every person who has access to visual sensory perception has endlessly of? It is the designs within our vision. That means before the person goes on Google, what do they have access to? A moment filled with design. And when I learn to appreciate the design of my own intelligence, like the same design of artwork, it's as if the way I kind of the concept of stress really melted for me. You know, it was in the sense that I recognized there is a evolutionary movement. The winds of evolution are going beyond the branches of our thoughts, between the branches of our knowledge. If I was to share more about my personal experience with a sort of unknown, unknown intelligence, I would say that that unknown intelligence was moving at speeds beyond speed. That means we evolve with our direction. That means if a creature doesn't care for their own moment of existence, if they don't care to look at their own intelligence in you, it's or let me say it like this. Um, Energy has appeared in a certain condition and circumstance of manifestation. This manifestation, thanks to the efforts of the forefathers of science, that we in some sense came into a mastery of the physical universe. You know, the physical plane, the physical dimension of our being. Okay, that I call it in a more simpler way the objective realm. So we came to a certain level of mastery when the moment human beings made nuclear bombs, that was like, okay, we can definitely mess up atoms, you know. So that's the thing. Objectively, we have attained a certain skill and mastery, and this is why science is forever honored for the might of its effort. But now, we can't just have external technologies evolving without actually the inner technology evolving. And the evolution of the inner technology is the self-awareness of the user of technology. Now more than ever, it's important for the person to realize that the mind is given to direct. That's pretty much it, you know? Every person's mind is directing, or we can say processing, sensory data. It's alive. You see, I'm pretty much saying our intelligence is alive beyond our thoughts. Alright, time to open up another random page of the Bhagavad Gita. It just feels like that time, you know? Shri Bhagavan said, Arjuna, hear once again my supreme word, which I shall speak to you, who are so loving, out of solicitude for your welfare. Neither gods nor the great sages know the secret of my birth, my manifestation in human or other forms out of mere sport. For I am the prime cause in all respects of gods, as well as of the great seers. Again, a pointer towards the language threshold. I find, of course. He who knows me in reality, as birthless and without beginning, and as the supreme Lord of the universe, he undiluted among men, is purged of all sins. What is the worst sin, guys? I find the worst sin is ignorance. Ignorance is the worst sin because it means there was something else. That's it. Reason, right knowledge, unclouded understanding, forbearance, veracity, control over the senses and mind, joy and sorrow, evolution and dissolution, fear and fearlessness, non-violence, equanimity, contentment, austerity, charity, fame, and I can't pronounce this, obloquy. These diverse traits of creatures emanate from me alone. What does that mean? That means the most intelligent behavior of the human being is the behavior of the collective field of activity. That means all our personalities is hovering in the same intelligent, here it comes, space. We're intelligent space guys. We're not just intelligent matter in space. The 7 great seers, their 4 elders, Sankha and others, and the 14 Manus, or progenitors of mankind, such as Savayambhava and his successors, who were all devoted to me, were born of my will. From them all these creatures in the world have come into being. God's pretty much saying he's running the place. And that's important because Arjuna, this archer in the battlefield, is beginning to comprehend the movement of intelligence beyond objective and subjective relationships. He who knows in reality this supreme divine glory and supernatural power of mine gets established in me through unfaltering devotion. Of this there is no doubt. I am the source of all creation, and everything in the world moves because of me. Knowing thus, the wise, full of devotion, constantly worship me. So I'm going to give a comment here, guys, because, you know, it's like the way it's written, it's very easy to confuse this with an alien overlord as a field of space. But it's like, but I'll tell you this, it's like this, right? It's like we've opened our eyes on a roller coaster. Now, we didn't design the roller coaster, but we're a design that's on the roller coaster. Now, it's kind of like after the roller coaster ride is finished, we are suddenly kind of stepping out of the roller coaster, it seems, and meeting the designer of the roller coaster, you know. how can I say it, guys? It's the other tenant in the room is the whole cosmos being alive. And that means, like, think about this concept of karma. When the body, physical, biological body, from a medical viewpoint, gets injured or disturbed by some force, the body sets into motion, for example, white blood cells when the person gets a scar, you know? The body strives towards balance, as if there's a gravitation of the biological organism towards a sort of balanced function, you know? So I thought, what if we're cells inside an organism? Unfathomable. That means the cells in my veins have no, I can't subscribe to my YouTube channel. So it means the level of comprehension. If we were suddenly cells in the vein of this an intelligent universe, and we suddenly became conscious, it's like we cannot fathom the face of the cosmos. But we know that we are its eyes for now. And there's a value in that. There's a value in just the opportunity that you are alive, that your ancestors endured for the transcendence of your greatest effort towards the evolution of your own meaning and vision. You know, we have different scholars around the world speaking of it differently. For example, when you kind of see, there was a very interesting debate between Jordan Peterson, who is this very profound psychologist, and a man named Zizek Slavoj, who is, I don't know if I'm doing him justice by saying this, but as I remember, he's a sort of kind of political, very profound political commentator, and in some sense, a sort of unique denomination of a Marxist, you know? As if he's like, I think, such a pure Marxist that it's not the Marxism of today, you know. But anyways, and they were talking about with Jordan Peterson, and Slavoj Žižek brought up this incredible point, and I'll post the debate in the Patreon page, guys, for you to see, and I'll tell you some of my comments on it too when I post it. But like the Slavoj Žižek looks at Jordan Peterson, and Jordan Peterson had this incredible wave of, like, he's really truly an advanced communicator, you know, and he had this idea that you got to start from the individual consciousness before we attend to the collective consciousness. That means if the person cannot maintain a simple space, how can they participate in the maintenance and advancement of a complex space? Right? So Jordan Peterson had this thing in his book where in one of his rules he had said like something like clean your room, you know? And and I got introduced to Jordan Peterson through his actually talks on Carl Jung, which I would advise, you know, people to check out. Which I've also actually already posted in the Patreon page, but anyways, the whole thing is that Slavoj Žižek looked at Jordan Peterson and he's like, how can you tell? He said Slavoj Žižek went like he kind of like really slammed his sword on Jordan Peterson's arguments shield. You know what I mean? And Slavoj Žižek said, okay, how can you go tell someone that they only need to clean their room as a resolution towards the collective? As if Slavoj Žižek was telling Jordan Peterson, if the person is occupied with just their individual space, they will not be aware of the collective environment, right? And so as if that person in Korea, regardless of how much he cleans his room, the overall system in North Korea is, for example, has a sort of unsatisfactory dimension to it. So, it's kind of like realizing that we are creatures that are born in systems and we access these systems as a process in it. And that is really what work is. Work is not just doing stuff. Work is an engagement, is a process. And the greatest work is a work that its value endures through time. Okay? So that means even if you were a financial investor, you're looking at stuff and you're like, okay, what out of all this stuff that I'm seeing I can invest in, I want to endure? You know, what matters, what is important? And when you really want to see what ideas challenge the test of time, that you go to back to the history books to see what the most ancient ideas are. And when you look at those ancient ideas, they had a outreach towards a universal audience. They weren't talking to a person in a certain nation or in a certain cultural program. They were talking to a being in an unknown universe where intelligence is known to certain limits, and it can even be through skill and conscious effort, even we can pilot beyond the language threshold. Like that's my kind of like. I remember one day I was like looking at the sky, and I was like, universe, help me make a school of advanced communication, a school where we are evolving the inner technologies, not just the outer technologies. Because the Terence McKenna, he said this incredible thing. He was in an auditorium in an art school, and he was speaking to auditorium filled with very like so many different artists and very various professors, you know. And Terence McKenna said, "The poets have failed us," and that sentence was like, first of all, I was like, "How dare you!" But then I realized the magnificent implication of it. The poets have failed us. The artist, he was being polite. He meant the creative effort on the surface of this earth has failed. Not that it has failed, but it has not reached its maximum potential. And the reason is because the songs and the mysteries and the narratives stopped evolving. The issue with with science is I find that it's not its method. The method is genius. The method is incredible. But the issue is, regardless of the scientific finding and experimental result, that result is being brought to a society, a civilization, where people are not just behaving rationally. We're not like behaving like a well disciplined AI. You know, we as human beings are various people are working at different intensities of awareness to their inner realm and an outer realm. Do you know? For example, when I kind of went to the kind of like I've been to nightclubs a couple times in my life. I can tell you, I've noticed my disposition to not be built for those environments, but I can tell you that what I perceived was a sort of. I remember I was like in London, Ontario, and I forget the name of the club, and we had pre-drinks at this house party, and we were like this group. And when we went to the club, it was like for a second I engaged activity, and I was kind of like a freshman at that point. And I remember I was pretty much it was like so strange. It was a sort of circular movement around the whole club, and that was it. It was like a fitness exercise while being incredibly intoxicated, because there were so many people in the club, and they were all moving. So at some point, I just go and sit down, and when I sat down, it was strange. And of course, this is uh, how can I tell you? Like, this was a phase of my life where everything I'm saying now, the viewpoints I have access to now, I didn't have access to back then. And I remember I just kind of sat still, and I was just wondering how the world moves. Like, imagine like being on a safari and you just see a lion, okay? And you just see that lion move in its habitat. It was like for a second I was sitting on that nightclub kind of uh, you know, long leg chair, and I was just looking at just how the ecosystem was moving, how the habitat was functioning, you know? And I realized how hilarious that every species is chasing something. And we as kind of species, as the Homo sapien, have an ability to consciously seek. That means consciously live with the world, you know? Life is really an incredible movement, and it's a movement we're giving interpretation to, meaning to. And beyond its movement, we have the opportunity to create new languages. We have to recognize that, again, our minds are like the surfboard on the waves of the solar activity. We are not just stardust, you know, hallucinating humanhood. Many days and nights come and go. The world turns, regardless of the speed we want it to turn. Only in the mind of man has there ever been an access to better potentials of living. The student asked the teacher, what is the greatest teaching? And the teacher asked the student, what is the greatest question to us? And the greatest question was the source of the movement. There's only one way up the mountain, and that is to just move up, to climb. And I've wondered, it was kind of my hobby, has just pretty much any time I've had free time, I've kind of been like, all right, for now I got free time, let's see how the world's working, And, I remember the first sentence that I officially declared to myself that I was a writer, that I felt it was the first sentence that purely I wrote out of my own will, you know, with no other intervention. When I wrote that, sentence. It was like, I don't want to, I'll never forget it, I don't want to live in a world that looks the same the next day. That was the first sentence that I declared myself as a writer, and I wrote that sentence and I put that, stuck that paper on the wall. And that was the thing, that the whole point of having sight is to experience, and the whole point of experience is to move beyond the angle of perception. There's many ways the world is moving currently. I thought about it like in every situation I've been in my life, probably other people have been too, and probably some of those people have handled it better. So that means right now there's a better way to handle my situation if I had access to it. This is why I say every moment has a kind of, I call it GP, genius potential. And that genius potential is really the effort to look at what's there to the degree that you see from its simplest raw being how it's emanating into meaning, at least in your lens of perception. Because I feel this awareness to the language threshold, this recognition that language is a technology we're navigating. I am not these words I'm saying, I'm using them though. You know what I mean? And so, as Albert Camus, this very incredible French philosopher, he was an absurdist, and he says, in the depths of winter, I found within me an invincible summer. Yeah, I think that was the exact quote. And that's the cool thing, that in the worst moments of life, we see the reverse angle, which is the greatest. In the moments I have failed, I have felt like I have descended. Because in life, your decisions kind of pilot you. And sometimes I've made decisions that have I felt they have pushed me into, I have descended into the sophistication of my inner realms. That means it's like there have been times where I remember I got so angry, and this anger was an anger of a loss. I was in an argument, with my brother, and so a very rare object, like a hard drive, was thrown at a door. So it's as if I lost like a lot of my talks, like maybe like 300 of these talks or something. In an instant, it just slammed to a door. And it was a situation where there was a rage. There was a rage not against others. When a person loses something, they victimize themselves instantly because they could have prevented it if there was more caution. So in failure, the blueprint to success is being given to you. It's like every person that has fallen to the curb, before they fell, it's as if the divine will of the cosmos folded a piece of paper, which was the blueprint to success, and put it in their pocket. And as they hit the curb, they're like, oh God, what do I do? Now I'm at the bottom. And then they looked in their pocket and they're like, okay, the only way is top, and you can never lose when you're at the bottom. You see, this is why it's easier for a lesser economical abundant part of the world to rebel. You see, I can totally see how we as creatures are defined not just by our ideology but our lifestyles. There's so many people who their life doesn't need to be occupied with just a sort of precision of language exploration. It can just be just living in a certain way. Having a simple, decent relationship with your moment is worth it. Kind of endless, a sort of artificial infinity. There has been moments, literally, I noticed the intensity of the moment, and I'm like, all right, I'm gonna be the fool in this moment. And I was like, okay, here, let's advance the internal acting career. And by the way, guys, anybody who's listening, feel free to engage, or if you see an angle to something I'm saying that you feel I don't see, feel free to share that too. It's like at the end of the day, we're a bunch of creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere. This podcast thing's pretty new, history wise. Every day is an opportunity for conscious engagement with the unconscious process of how there are various designs. The cool thing about being an individual in the mode of individual consciousness as a being is that you have made the world into an infinite spectrum. That means the only reason we can create an alphabet is because we are outside of the alphabet. The reason we can speak is because we are not the concepts. We're observing and from a space where we see various concepts. So what that means is the behind your eyes, it's not just like whack-a-mole with just images. It's a river. It's a dynamism. Behind your eyes, there's a life being lived. And that life, believe it or not, can pilot the objective realm. That means most people, they are unconsciously, one can say, or they're not conscious of subjective navigation of the objective realm. That means like when you see a person and you hold a cup in front of them and you ask them what is this, they'll tell you it's a cup. You know, and if you say no, it's not, that person will be like, no, what are you saying? Everywhere in the world they call this a cup. This is a cup. The designer even called it a cup. It's a cup, man. It's a cup. But we see it's just a symbol attributed to an object. That was the Buddha's teaching, the nature of emptiness, learning to acknowledge emptiness. It's like fear dies when it was never born. Or another way of kind of saying the same thing would be how Napoleon was known. Napoleon Bonaparte was known to say, uh, the impossible is a word in a fool's dictionary. It's like somebody came to him and he's probably like he was chilling with his friends, Napoleon, and he's like, I'm gonna be emperor, guys. And his friends were like, good luck, man. His friends were like, all right, Napoleon, you've had too many drinks, man, calm down. And they said, it's impossible. What are you saying? You can't be emperor, And Napoleon looked at them and said, if you really think about it, impossible means that the word impossible can't exist without possibility. There is a way, but how that way appears, the intelligent, shamanic, intuitive relationship we require, and the kind of discretion to our own archetypal constitution we require. It's kind of like the same. I can tell you that if there is unknown fields of activity that move our knowledge throughout the moment, these unknown fields of activity, their clue is that they are not shaped. So if our language is limited to just talking about shapes, and we cannot somehow find a way to penetrate the veils of the language threshold, how can I tell you? It's like the greatest advancement of man perhaps is not a physical advancement, it's an inner realization. The reason the concept of enlightenment in the ancient cultures, it was kind of acknowledged as a self-realization. Why did they call it self-realization? Because there is something there already. You have not been aware of it and you're realizing it suddenly. You're like, whoa, the world was always working this way. Whoa, my attention has just been this kind of spacious sight dwelling into the moment. Do you see? So this is honestly, the true nature of reality is surreal. We're not living in reality, we're living in surreality. And so this kind of we can say surrealist kind of, I'll declare it as that, neo surrealist surrealist kind of perspective is really how the reality is returning back to the surreal. Like when we get bored of reality, imagination's what's left. That's why the entertainment industry thrives, because imagination has found a way to become globalized, which is incredible. For me, filmmakers around the world uh, are like kind of the microphone uh, uh, to the ears of the future generations, uh, in the sense of how through the language of film, there is a communication of the other dimension, the other world. I remember when I was very young, I saw the movie Gladiator, and it's automatically my favorite because it was the first time I saw someone put an image to heaven on TV. Oh, it blew my mind. And I was very young, at that time. Not very young, but, like, when did Gladiator come out? 2000? I was maybe like 10. That scene at the end of Gladiator where the guy's pretty much walking between dimensions. As Maximus walked across into the fields of Elysium, there was a shift in the texture of the dimension, as if we're not just being ourself in the moment, we're also being the allowance of the world for this self. That means that's another way of saying, like back in the day, cars had these like old antennas which you had to move to get proper signal, you know. So it was like these antennas, it's like the humanity is like this, where if we treat the brain as an antenna and the phenomena of the mind as a part of a process of a unknown field of activity that is alive, it's like this hilarious realization that the world is the alien, not the creature. It's the mind that moves towards the unfamiliar universal position. And really, what is it? Life is oscillating between the known and the unknown. There's things known happening and there's things unknown happening. That's it. That's the simplest way I can say life is happening. And so this is why, it's so crucial to recognize that our species is defined by its greatest effort, not its greatest ignorance. Ignorance will always be around. I mean, it's kind of like it's a type of plant that just grows in the garden of human existence. But at the same time, we can say vision in its direction will move towards collective aims. And when you look at the evolution of the human being towards a more kind of senior maturity, that maturity is in some sense a recognition of the world's voice. That means one can say desire means you're more interested about about with what your mind is doing than what the world is doing. or how there's a symbiosis of mind in world. A concept I've developed, and pretty much it's going to be hopefully something I can finish. I've given it a time period of 10 years. In 10 years, I think I see my books as projects I'm working on. And this kind of magnum opus, that thing that I'm ultimately, after I've finished a lot of kind of set certain ideas into motion, certain books into motion, this would be my main focus, where hopefully I would have some time and the funds to kind of look into it. But it's pretty much this concept I've created, where I call it's this like bookshelf of a series, where it's called The Pillars of Civilization. And the Pillars of Civilization is this idea that there are certain values that are like pillars keeping the civilization. They are foundations. And these values are so crucial to the advancement of human civilization, where it's as if it's a situation where this pillar must be defended regardless if you're an evil person or a good person, bad person. It's like regardless of the banner or archetype you're gravitated towards, it's like you have to protect this value, because it's like the superhero and the villain both realizing something is destroying the world, and if they don't attend to that, they would have nothing to fight over. So it's like the continuity of many life forms. Humanity is a kind of life form that has become conscious of the ecosystem, and has even become conscious of its own influence upon the ecosystem. It's like, what's interesting is like, it's not just man is having a negative effect on the environment. Man is also aware he's having a negative effect on his environment, but it's just that the model of civilization is not designed to make people care for it. I remember saying that in all schools around the world, all educational systems, every year where the student wants to graduate, they have to plant a tree, or they can't graduate to the next grade. And they have to do it as a collective group. And so it's like this kind of whole school is going on this kind of natural field trip into nature and planting trees. And the process of planting trees is kind of, you see people find commonality in where they are and what they do. You know, if we can make civilization, imagine you stepped out of your door and you suddenly saw civilization. You woke up one day and it was the most advanced. Everything was happening at such a high level of efficiency that it was as if you had kind of woke up from a time machine. And so it would be that kind of civilization we need to strive for. There's a hidden geometric roots to the disposition of all conception, and that it becomes it's like, this is something that Mr. Within would say, like, attention to thought, and the speed thought is accelerating in the subjective realms. As it increases speed, at most you can hold on to it as a geometrical shape. So I'm saying this, as your thoughts speed up, if you treated your consciousness as a river, as a stream, imagine the speed of that stream. Imagine the mind was a river, and the speed of the river is becoming intense, ridiculously intense. As it accelerates, all the thoughts and particles and thoughts and memories and visualizations and every subjective phenomenon that's being moved in that river at that moment, conscious moment of witnessing, being aware of the subjective realms. What is happening is that speed, it accelerates, and then becomes pure geometrical, you can say, the divine blueprint of the dimension. So it's as if when you live sincere enough to some degree, and honest enough with the world, just accepting how the simplicity is okay before the complexity, that simplicity reverts you back to clear vision, to the raw vision, which is literally wondering about matter's meaning with an awareness to the void. It's a very deep level of philosophy, I would say, and it's a level of philosophy not for the faint of heart, because it is breaching into the mystical mountain. When any concept that breaches to the mystical peak, it becomes reaches a sort of epitome of its evolution, where the whole concept has to be challenged from the beginning. The reverse engineering, even of one's memories, takes one back to the moment where the whole moment is being generated. So it's as if we are generating ourselves as a self that is generating linear relationships with its memories day to day. What's going on is that we are actually like a jar. This antenna, uh, the brain, if it was seen as a biological multidimensional antenna, is like this jar that has liquid in it. And because the creature is moving all the time, the chemical reaction patterns of this, like how the water in the jar is moving, is different. It's not a sort of linear pattern. So really, it's just, I think we haven't had an ability to confront it. Just like how some what's his name? Plato created something and he called it like the noble lie, a white lie. And a white lie is a lie which has a sort of altruistic consequence. It's being done to protect, for example, a child from the more chaotic truth beyond their comprehension. It's a lie that at its core is honest, something like that. Apologies, guys. Had to run, handle something. That's what happens, guys, when you attempt to talk all day. You know, it's. Let's see what Krishna would say to Arjuna. The five elements, the ego, the intellect, the unmanifest primordial matter, the 10 organs of perception and action, the mind, and the five objects of sense, sound, touch, color, taste, and smell. Also desire, aversion, pleasure, pain, the physical body, consciousness, firmness. Thus is the Kastera with its evolutes briefly stated. Absence of pride, freedom from hypocrisy, non-violence, forbearance, uprightness of speech and mind, devout service of the preceptor, internal and external purity, steadfastness of mind and control of body, mind and the senses, dispassion towards the objects of enjoyment of this world and the next, excuse me, dispassion towards the objects of enjoyment of this world and the next, and also absence of egotism, pondering again and again on the pain and evils inherent in birth, death, old age, and disease. That means after some point, even the Buddhist psychology of seeing reincarnations of and suffering and a sort of simulation, that's like there's automatically an evolution beyond it. Birth, death, old age, and disease. Absence of attachment and the sense of mindness in respect of son, wife, home, etc., and constant equipoise of mind both in favorable and unfavorable circumstances. Unflinching devotion to me through exclusive attachment, living and secluded in holy places, and finding no delight in the company of worldly people. Okay, seems like God is feeling a bit antisocial. Constancy. I'm joking. Constancy in self-knowledge and seeing God as the object of true knowledge. Of course, God is saying this to Arjuna. Constancy in self-knowledge and seeing God as the object of true knowledge. All this is declared as knowledge, and what is contrary to this is called ignorance. Krishna continues, and he says to Arjuna, I shall speak to you at length about that which ought to be known, and knowing which one attains supreme bliss, and knowing which one attains supreme bliss. That supreme Brahma, who is the Lord of the two beginningless entities, Prakriti and Jiva, which is pretty much soul and matter, is said to be neither Sat, being, nor Asat, non-being. So pretty much God is telling this archer in the middle of a battlefield that the
the supreme truth, who is the Lord, that means the supreme intelligence of two beginningless entities. That means literally ink drops on a page. Okay, that the moment ink is on the page, it has no beginning, it has no end. It's just there. Prakriti and Jiva, consciousness and matter. So pretty much he's saying the truth of the simultaneity, the Lord of the simultaneity of consciousness and matter is said to be neither being nor asat, non-being. So what does that mean? That means it's like it's beyond the language threshold. Literally, it's nothing that we can fathom in language. So it can't be a conceptual attainment. Do you see? So it can't be ideological. So an ideological, pathological way to it is not the only way. That's just, you know. So anyways, Krishna continues. It has hands and feet on all. Oh, okay, wait a minute. Oh yeah, it has hands and feet on all sides, eyes, head, and mouth in all directions, and ears all round, for it stands pervading all in the universe. Though perceiving all sense objects, it is really speaking devoid of all senses. Nay, though unattached, it is the sustainer of all nonetheless. And though attributeless, it is the enjoyer of gunas, the three modes of Prakriti. It exists without and within all beings, and constitutes the moving and the unmoving creation as well. And by reason of its subtlety, it is incomprehensible. It is close at hand and stands afar too. Though integral like space in its undivided aspect, it appears divided as it were, in all animate and inanimate beings. And that Godhead, which is the only object worth knowing, is the sustainer of beings as Vishnu, the destroyer as Rudra, and the creator of all as Brahma. That means he's saying the only thing worth knowing is how we are oscillating between these three dimensions. The dimension of the sustainer, Vishnu, that means things are maintained. The destroyer, Rudra, which is like kind of, or Shiva, you can say, kind of like how things, get destroyed, and in some sense a dimension where things are created. So we tend to see all these three things happening at the same time, but you can also see these three things as three dimensions where all phenomenology accessible to comprehend the Godhead is positioned. That means in life, what do you really see? Things are being maintained, and then things are born, things are maintained, and things die. Now, the word "die" it's another way of saying we don't know what happens, but it's a resolution to at least the physical destination. Excuse me. Krishna continues. It exists without and within all beings, and constitutes the moving and the unmoving creation as well. And by reason of its subtlety, it is incomprehensible. It is close at hand and stands afar too. Though integral like space in its undivided aspect, it appears divided as it were in all animate and inanimate beings. And that Godhead, which is the only object worth knowing, is the sustainer of beings as Vishnu, the destroyer as Rudra, and the creator of all as Brahma. That supreme Brahma is said to be the light of all lights and entirely beyond Maya. So what does that mean, guys? That means the light of all lights, it's like Maya is movement. It's like the happening, it's the occurrence of the physical realm, of the objective realm. So Maya is what is beyond Maya, is the light that is allowing for Maya to be made conscious of. So the light of all lights is like the light that enters the eyes of the universe. Excuse me. That Godhead is knowledge itself, worth knowing and worth attaining through real wisdom, and is particularly abiding in the hearts of all. You see, this is the cool thing. There's always a Zen koan-like thing here. Because it says, and then he says, and is particularly abiding in the hearts of all. And if you really look at this sentence, guys, it's like, it's paradoxical because God is in the heart of everyone, but people are looking for God. Do you see what I mean? It's something that's everywhere, but we as creatures inside everywhere are looking for it. You see, it's like fish looking for water, trying to define the ocean in comparison to a bigger fish, but the ocean will never be understood as a bigger fish. If, for example, there's this wisdom story of like a bunch of fish go ask this older fish what's God, which is the ocean, to them, and the older fish says pretty much everything the religious blueprint says. Anyways, let's continue. The certain monotheistic religious blueprint shares. Thus, the truth of Krishna continues. Thus, the truth of the Kshetra and knowledge, as well as of the object worth knowing, God has been briefly discussed. Knowing this in reality, my devotee attains to my being. So that means there's something intelligent going on. If we don't pay attention to it, we can't access it. Prakriti and Purusha, consciousness and matter and consciousness. Krishna is saying, know both these as beginningless. That means all your suffering that has to do with your objective realm, it has no beginning. And all the sort of suffering of internal realms or meaning and purpose and all this, that has no beginning too. And it's simply because language is evocational, I feel. And know all modifications such as likes and dislikes, etc., and all the objects constituted of the three gunas as born of Prakriti. Prakriti is said to be responsible for bringing forth the evolutes and the instruments, while the individual soul is declared to be responsible for experience of joys and sorrow. So matter is like the biological program is performing, and we are also conscious of the biological program receiving from it. Now, what is receiving what? That's a question that can transcend the language threshold. Only the Purusha, which is consciousness, in association with Prakriti, experiences objects of the nature of the three gunas evolved from Prakriti, and it is attachment with these gunas that is responsible for the birth of this soul in good and evil wombs. Okay. So, pretty much, guys, I think what the Bhagavad Gita is attempting to share here is that consciousness, in association with matter, experiences all the objects in nature that appear through the three gunas, which is, let's say, creation, maintenance, and death. I think those were the three gunas. Evolved from Prakriti, from matter. That means the world is a program, and the self, which is consciousness, has awakened in this program. Okay? And the self that is awakened in this program experiences objects through these three dimensions of things beginning, things changing, and being maintained, and things ending. And then it says, only the Purusha in association with Prakriti experiences objects of the nature of the three gunas evolved from Prakriti, and it is attachment with these gunas. So that means if you're still identified by creation, maintenance, and destruction, you all will be born in good and evil wombs. What an ancient book thing to say, you know? The spirit dwelling in this body is really the same as the Supreme. He has been spoken of as the witness, the true guide, the sustainer of all, the experiencer, as the embodied soul, in brackets, the overlord and the absolute as well. He who thus knows the Purusha spirit, and prakriti, nature, together with the gunas, even though performing his duties in every way, is not born again. That means you can live on a way in this world that you are not a conceptual creature, so there's no strangely, it's like your attention doesn't cause Buddhist reincarnation. So there is this story. I gotta put a pause here, guys. This a very interesting story comes to my mind, and this story, I believe it's in the Puranas, I think, written by Rishi Vyata, the author of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita. The story is about this sage. I forget his name, and this sage, if I remember correctly, he was such a kind of he was this sage that didn't even he was just meditating somewhere, and the king's uh, the king's carriage passes him by. It's not carriage. The king is kind of being moved on a board. The king is sit on a board, and people are moving him, right? And so the king sees this yogi and tells him, "Come and help these men carry me," you know. And so this yogi stands up, and suddenly all the other men, the whole thing becomes shaky, and all these guys kind of carrying this king on this board, because this guy is trying to not to step on the insects as he's walking, trying to carry this king. And the king's like, "What are you doing?" And he has a conversation with the king, and pretty much the king becomes enlightened or something. But the story of this guy is strange, this sage, and sorry, just a second. The story of the sage is really pretty much the guy's meditating, trying to be in a sort of samadhi state before death comes, and he suddenly notices there's a deer in a river. You know, like the guy's meditating, trying to be in this ultimate state when the time comes, when he has to transition out of this plane. And what happens is suddenly this deer, pregnant deer that is running away, gets caught and gives birth to a baby deer and then gets killed by the tiger. And this sage suddenly automatically runs and saves the baby deer. And then he raises the baby deer and finds an attachment, and there comes a moment where he's suddenly wondering, the baby deer's gone missing, and he's kind of had a sort of parental role for this baby deer. So he's suddenly thinking about this baby deer, and then suddenly he dies, and his next life he's born as a deer. Like that was a kind of Vedic story. So that's the thing, that it's like that. It's about maintenance and awareness of attention. Really, it's getting to know how your mind is actually a novel moment of awareness. When I say novel, it's too new to define. So Krishna continues. I'm going to read a little bit more, guys, and then probably get out of this Bhagavad Gita quote tunnel. Some, by meditation, behold the Supreme Spirit in the heart with the help of their refined and sharp intellect. Others realize it through the discipline of knowledge, and still others through discipline of action, karma yoga. Other dull-witted persons, however, not knowing thus, worship even as they have heard from others, the knowers of truth, and even they who are thus devoted to what they have heard are able to cross the ocean of mundane existence in the shape of death. Arjuna, whatsoever being, the moving or unmoving, is born, know it as emanated through the union of Kshetra, matter, and Kshetrajna, spirit. So he's pretty much saying, whatever being, the moving or the unmoving, is born when that means when there is birth, when you're a creature born into the world, know it as emanated through the union. So we are an oscillation between matter and consciousness, which is Kshetrajna and Kshetra. He alone truly sees, who sees the Supreme Lord as imperishable and abiding equally in all perishable beings, both animate and inanimate. In other words, you're, I think, noticing a nature that is the common denominator underneath all the psychological movements of the human mind on this earth. And lastly, Krishna says, for by seeing the Supreme Lord equally present in all, he does not kill the self by himself and thereby attains the supreme state. That means you pilot beyond the language threshold through a recognition that your direct experience is beyond the indirect reception of symbols that kind of have made our knowledge so far on this rock, on this pebble in a light beam. So anyways, guys, a few more things I could say about the subtitle is that really attention is authoring meaning. And it's honestly symbiosis with a known intelligence with an unknown intelligence. That's it. The microcosm challenged the macro only to see it was the macro. The macrocosm challenged the micro only to see it was the micro. The world appears apart, but it is bound by its separation. The space between the finger of God and man on the Sistine Chapel, that space is joining their fingers. That means man connects through God through space. Man's finger touches God's finger through space, which means an awareness that intelligence is not matter. It's not just the leaf in the river is not moving the river is moving the leaf. So anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. I hope this episode was helpful. Much blessings and namaste.